Hi everyone, Sticks here. Today I want to show you guys how to build the drone Eclipse Anubis. I'll show you how the frame was designed to be put together, point out some of the features that are unique to this frame. I'm going to show you how I like to build mine, as well as talk about some of the options of different ways that you might like to put yours together. And I'll even show you a couple of my previous builds so you can see different ways that I've tried things. So first of all, here is the frame kit that you'll be receiving. There are obviously 4 arms. You have your top plate, your bottom plate. This is the plate for sandwiching the arms between this and the top plate. You have an optional SMA holder for your VTX SMA, bag of screws and washers and nuts, some 20mm standoffs, a couple of battery straps, and this is the FPV camera mount. Yours will be slightly different from this. We've beefed it up a little bit, but we'll talk about the features of this later. First thing we're going to want to do is, of course, start putting our frame together. Just grab our 4 M3x12 screws. Take this plate here and this plate, and we're going to sandwich our arms in between here. Got our 4 screws in. Now for the arms. Now on the arms, all of these pieces, which I'll explain in a bit here, all of those pieces go towards the inside. Now this piece, you can put this either way that you want, but let me point this out real quick. These pieces are made for your receiver antennas. The idea is that you can put some zip ties off from this and have your antennas sticking out a bit, and where they'll be, they will never end up in your propellers. So you can choose to put those on the front, put them on the back, whichever you like. For me, I prefer to have them on the front, that way they're pointing backwards. That's just my thought. So anyways, now we put that piece on. Now we take our 4 lock nut and put those on. I'm just going to go ahead and leave those loose for now. I don't like tightening anything until everything's kind of put together. Now your M3x14 screws, those go in the middle 4 holes here. So there's that. So this is where your PDB is going to go. You're going to take these 4 nylon washers, put those all down first, and then your PDB is going to go on top of those, just like this. But before we do that, I'm going to make one suggestion here. Now, something you need to remember here, this is the top of the frame. This is the bottom of the frame. We are building our stack downwards, which is a little different from our conventional frames. We're going to go downward like this underneath the arms. So, one little suggestion that I have, or maybe you don't need to, but I will. I'm going to go ahead and put my motors on right now. I'm not gonna tighten them down completely. I'm certainly not going to put any thread lock or anything on them. I'm just going to put them on. Just that way it kind of helps me to remember that, hey, you're building a copter that's somewhat upside down. So now that I've got that, and I've got all my screws in here, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up these lock nuts. The next thing is to get our PDB put on. I'm going to have to go ahead and get my battery lead put onto this. Alright, now that I've got my battery lead wired up, I want to take a second to point out another option that we have. There's several ways that you could put your battery lead off from this, of course, but you know, obviously I need to figure that out before I put the PDB on. So what I'm going to choose to do is to go off from the side and come back this way with it. Now I'll show you a couple of past builds. Here I decided to go off the back, and I've done this a couple of times. I've gone off the back. It hasn't caused me too much of an issue. You end up putting your battery on something like this. It runs off from the back. Yes, it is very close to the propellers. Again, it hasn't caused me any real issues, but it most definitely could. Another option that you might choose, you could maybe do something like this, come up underneath from the front. The only reason I don't like that is because I have a GoPro session mount on mine, and if I do that, then it doesn't really allow the battery to have enough room to slide up as far as I want. You kind of want the battery to go up as far as possible. So again, my choice is to go underneath the arm like I did with this one. If you come off from the side and go underneath the arm, then that way your battery can sit in like this. And then the lead goes underneath the arm, and then you never ever have to worry about propellers hitting your battery lead, because we all have been there and it sucks when a propeller chops your doggone battery lead. So take whatever battery you have that has the shortest lead. For me, that's the Tattoo R-Line, and just kind of dry fit it on here. Figure out, okay, I need it to be out this far. I need my XT60 to come out as far as this arm, about like so. You don't want it to be too tight to where it's rubbing against the carbon fiber here, because keep in mind, carbon fiber is a conductor, and if you short this out on there, you're gonna have a bad time. I got my battery lead on. I just kind of verify that it came back as far as I would like. It's not perfect, but it's good. For my build, I've chosen the RR OSD version 2. So since this PDB has OSD built in, I'm going to have to go ahead and wire up my VTX and my camera before I go any further. Camera, of course, will be up in the front here. I'm going to go a little bit extra long with my camera wires. The camera mount was made in a way that you can easily take this off to get to the back of your camera. So to make things easier on myself later, I'm going to go ahead and make that a little bit extra long. If you kind of set up the bottom plate just in place, you can see the camera mount is going to go like this. If I pull that out, okay, I've got plenty of wire there. And for the VTX, of course you have some options of what you can do with this. You can either put it on the top plate here, or you could fix it to the bottom plate if you like. My suggestion is to go ahead and go on to the top plate. You see these two little indents here and here? That's so that we can zip tie this to the plate. Now I'm ready to wire up my ESCs. Keep in mind that the ESCs on this build, they're designed to go on the bottom of the arms, not on the top. Usually we put them on the top. This time we're going to put them on the bottom. For mine, I've chosen to use these ESC protectors. These are absolutely not necessary when you're using this frame. One of the big things about putting the ESCs on the bottom is that you don't have to worry about prop strikes taking out one of your ESCs. I'm going to go ahead and use them simply because I've had some really strange things happen in the past, and also I just simply like how they look. So if you're somebody that likes to save as much weight as possible, obviously you don't want to use that. For me, I don't really care all that much, so I'm going to go ahead and use them. Figure out how long your wires need to be. Go ahead and snip. Do that with all four and solder them up. Now that I've got my ESCs soldered onto the PDB, just to help keep things in place, I'm going to go ahead and put the nylon standoffs on. I'm using M3 by 6 millimeter standoffs. We'll just go ahead and screw these on just to help hold the PDB in place while we do everything else we need to do. Okay, so take your motor wires, run them down through these little grooves here that we've got on the side, down underneath, and thanks to BL Heli Suite, we don't really need to worry about which wires go to which pads, because if your motor is spinning the wrong way, you can just change it in BL Heli Suite. You'll notice that I leave my motor pads exposed. That's something I learned from Flying Bear. If you leave them exposed, nothing gets hurt. The benefit to this is if you bust a motor, something happens to one of your motors, you've got to swap it out. It is so easy to change it out this way. You don't have to worry about messing with the ESC at all, really. Just unsolder it, slap the new one on, solder it, you're good to go. Now I've got all of my motor wires tinned, I've got my ESCs tinned, but before I solder the motor wires to the ESCs, I like to take some shrink tube and put it over these motor wires. This is certainly not necessary, it's just a precautionary step that I like to take just to protect as many things as possible. The only thing that I worry about here is right on this edge. I mean, you could sand that down and glue it or something if you wanted to do that. But you know, you don't want your wires to short out on the carbon fiber right here. Now I've got my motors and ESCs wired up, soldered. Got the shrink tube over the motors protecting, soldered down to the ESCs. Next thing I like to do is a quick power check using my trusty smoke stopper here, just in case something is wired up incorrectly. And we hear the beep from the ESCs, so that's what I like to hear. Now I'm ready to move on to wiring up the flight controller. When you're ready to wire up your flight controller, the main thing to think about here is the orientation of the frame. Keep in mind that we are upside down with this, so you know you'll have to remember which way your flight controller is. So if you were to just set it down, you know, the flight controller as of right now is upright. If you were to set it down and wire it up like this, you just have to remember in Betaflight or whatever GUI you're using to set the roll to 180. The way that I prefer to do it is to have the flight controller, it's upright right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wire it up, and then I'm going to flip it over. That way I can get all of my wires nice and neatly tucked in underneath the flight controller. One other thing that I'm going to do, I'm actually going to turn this around. See the arrow right here pointing forward. I'm going to turn mine around this way. Reason being, I want my USB to be on the opposite side of my battery lead. I don't want to have to fight with the battery lead anytime I want to hook up to that USB port. So I'm going to have this, when it's done, this is going to be sitting like this. So I just have to remember in the Betaflight GUI to turn yaw to 180 degrees. So I set mine down, I put it on like this, just set it on 2. I'm going to wire all of these up. I'm going to cut these much shorter, of course. I'm going to wire these up, and then when I'm done with that, I'll simply flip it over and tuck all of my wires in. One more quick reminder, when you're getting ready to solder up your flight controller, keep in mind this is motor 1, this is motor 2, this is motor 3, this is motor 4, because we're upside down. Don't forget that. I've accidentally wired one of mine up incorrectly, and it's a frustrating thing. Now that I have the ESCs and my receiver and buzzer all soldered up to the flight controller, I'm ready to go ahead and put the rest of these components in. The first thing I'm going to put in is the VTX. Just so you know, I like to use this VHB double-sided tape. This stuff works great. It's on here right now. I don't know if you can see it in the video here. But just to make sure that nothing slides around, you know, in a crash or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and click that guy in. I'm going to put him right up here. I'm not going to put it completely tight up to this carbon fiber here. I don't want for these wires to end up shorting out on the carbon fiber, but I'm going to get it in there pretty close. Okay. So now something that I like to do, I like to stack the receiver directly on top of my VTX, and then I'm going to put a zip tie around both of them. For my build, I've chosen to use this XM Plus receiver, which is very tiny. It does not have telemetry, but I'm using a PDB that has OSD anyways, so I'm not too worried about the telemetry. And I'm going to actually bring my buzzer back there as well so that I can zip tie all 3 of those things together. So take the flight controller, go ahead and flip it over, carefully tucking all of my wires in underneath. Okay. Now you notice that I left the antenna wires up in the front here. Remember that I put these little tabs here up in the front, so I'm going to put some zip ties on those, and I'm going to have my antennas come out like so. So now I can take a zip tie, put it around here, going back through. I don't want my buzzer dangling around too much. Let's see, let's put him over here. And tighten that guy down. Okay, so VTX receiver and buzzer are now all in place. Flight controller is in place. Okay, now the flight controller is ready to have some nylon nuts on it to hold it down. Now that I have all my components installed, I'm ready to go ahead and install the bottom plate. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my standoffs on using my 4 M3x6 screws. I've got my 4 20mm standoffs installed onto the bottom plate. So I'm ready to go ahead and put this guy on. It goes like this. This big hole in the front. That way when the camera's installed you can get to the back of the camera if necessary. This piece, again, as mentioned before, is optional. This is for your SMA. So if you have a VTX that uses a pigtail like mine, then I suggest going ahead and using this piece. My personal preference is always use a VTX with an SMA, or use a VTX with a pigtail, I mean. Personally, I won't even buy a VTX if it does not use the pigtail. Okay, so this piece goes down into the 2 holes here. Alright, got that guy in place. Now we take our bottom plate and into these 2 holes. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of M3x8 screws. Just go ahead and screw them into the top just to hold this in place for me. So now we're ready to go ahead and install the FPV camera. Let's talk about the FPV camera mount. Scott from Drone Eclipse has spent a lot of time designing this thing, and it has turned out absolutely awesome. It's made from a SLS nylon, which is a hard material, but I assure you this is very strong. Simply take and slide your FPV camera into the mount. And now if you look closely, you can see that we have all these little notches here. So you can go anywhere from a 30-degree tilt down to a 60-degree tilt in 5-degree increments. If you have the GoPro session mount, you can have the session at 25, 35, or 45 degrees. And we have designed this to go slip over the front of the bottom plate so that it kind of helps protect your bottom plate here. If, say, I don't know, you slide on some concrete, if you're flying in a parking garage or something like that. One of the great features about this is this little guy right here. It keeps your camera from slipping. I think most of us at some point have fallen victim to a small crash that managed to completely jack up the camera angle that we had on our quad, and you lift back up and you go, oh crap, what's going on? You don't have to worry too much about that with this one. So it does come white like this, but this material is dyeable, so I guess you can use maybe a food coloring or something to dye it. I don't have that and have not tried it, but what I do have are these little paint markers that I bought off Amazon a while back. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this to paint it. So I've got my FPV camera mount here that I've painted purple. I'm going to install the FPV camera. So again, you just push this guy up in here. You have 2 slots for these little side pieces. You just slide them in. Push it all the way in. Then after you push it in, then you can click this guy down. Okay, for me, I know that I want my FPV camera at 40 degrees, so I'm going to go ahead and go 30, 35, 40 on the third one right there. Same thing on the other side, just double check that it's in the right place. And this guy's ready to install. Now you don't have to make your camera wires as long as I made mine. Obviously I made mine a bit longer than necessary, but I just like things easy to get to. So go ahead and plug that in there. Okay, now this piece, this little slot here at the bottom, slides right over the bottom plate. Fits snugly there. And we can take our last couple of screws that we have in the kit and put them in through the top. One of the last things here, I'm going to take care of these receiver wires, or excuse me, receiver antennas. So I'm going to use these little slots down here, and I'm going to take and put a zip tie through it. Like so. Now on yours, these pieces here are going to be slightly larger. We found that these small ones make it kind of difficult to get your zip tie on here and have it tight so that it doesn't move around. It's just not enough. But we fixed it on yours. I'm using an old version. You can cut your zip ties right at the end of your antenna. Put the shrink tube over the zip tie and over your antenna at the same time. This is going to help hold that in place. Now you got your antennas sticking out of here so that they're not you know, a lot of times I put my antennas on the arms. It works out pretty well, but you do lose quite a bit of range doing that. Having the antennas out away from the carbon fiber is much better. You'll get much better range like that. Alright, go ahead and add my VTX antenna. And for me, one last step is to add some LEDs. Now I've added my LEDs. Ooh, 30. I've got one step left. Actually, a couple of steps. Don't forget to put in the rest of your screws for your motors. I'm going to take some time and actually put in some rubber soft motor mounts that I got from PB3D. It's not just hype, folks. Soft mounting your motors really helps. One last thing that I would like to show you is putting on the battery straps. I know that sounds slightly ridiculous, but I would just want to show you how we put this here. Okay, so you see these holes here and these holes here are for your 2 battery straps. Now the best way I think to do this is to push it up through the bottom. On this back one, you're going to want to leave this so that it can sit right on the top of your battery. Just that way your propellers don't hit it. So pull this a little bit further, slightly further because some of my batteries are smaller. Okay, right on top. And I'm going to push this piece through the other side. Come on. Okay, there's one. Now, doing it this way, for one thing, if you break a strap, it's much easier to replace it rather than wrapping it around on the inside. This is just easier. The second reason this is better is because you now have this like gummy area of your battery strap, which will help to hold your battery in place, rather than, I don't know, you see how I've got Velcro on all my batteries. Some of my quads I use Velcro. This is just much simpler. I'll go ahead and do the same thing on this one. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, now my battery can sit like so. And I can plug it in underneath the arm here, like that. The last piece that we have to install, if you decide to use it, is the GoPro session mount. It's easy to install by simply sliding it over the top of your FPV camera mount. And then it holds in place using the last 4 screws in the kit. I like to start by screwing in the top 2 screws first. Put the top screws in, but put them in loosely, and decide what angle you want. Again, top is 25 degrees, middle is 35 degrees, bottom is 45 degrees. For me, for freestyle, I like 35 degrees. So that's where we're going. And once you've got all 4 in, you can go ahead and snug them down. There it is. The battery fits nicely under there. Just like so. Alright, there it is. I hope that this video was helpful. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, whatever, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. For anybody that wants to know what components I decided to use for this build, I'll go ahead and leave those down in the description with some links so you know where to find the parts. Alright everyone, hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.